It's Wednesday, so we riding the HBCU circuit, and we're kicking it off in Nashville, Tennessee. What is the road to the playoffs for the Tennessee State Tigers? Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We're going on the HBCU circuit, guys. We're kicking it off in Nashville, but you know what this means. We go through every single HBCU on the FCS level, whether that's Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, Hampton, the Independents, or the SWAC and the MEAC. Today, we're going to kick it off with Tennessee State and the SWAC West, and we'll wrap it up and close out with the MEAC and those independents. So, Tennessee State is the only HBCU whose postseason aspirations are still in the balance. That's why, to me, going into the last week of many people's regular seasons, and it is the last week of Tennessee State's regular season, they are the most interesting HBCU because they're the only one who don't know where they're going to be when this is all said and done. And a lot of that decision, or I wouldn't even say decision, a lot of that large part of that fate depends on what they do this week against Southeast Missouri. I left the team out of the Big South-OVC mashup when we spoke about it on yesterday's episode, and I didn't put in Tennessee Tech, and that actually changes things because listen here, if Tennessee Tech is either in that mashup with Southeast Missouri, Tennessee State, and UT Martin, and it's a four-way tie, or if it ends up being a three-way tie, and then Tennessee Tech is the fourth team in the standings, that's going to really disrupt what Tennessee State is trying to do, which is accomplish or win, rather, the Big South-OVC automatic bid because they didn't beat Tennessee Tech. A four-way tie, it would actually be Southeast Missouri because of things I don't feel like getting into because we're going through every single school. But the inclusion of Tennessee Tech is a problem because they lost. Tennessee State lost to them. So if it's the four-team mashup, tiebreakers lose that way. If they're the fourth team in the standings and it comes down to, all right, how have you fared against the next highest seed? It'll be bad for them there, right? And so really the inclusion of Tennessee Tech is beneficial to Southeast Missouri. So if you're looking for the road to the playoffs for Tennessee State, I'm going to call them TSU because it's easier for right now. You get a reprieve. For TSU, the road to the playoffs is simple. You need to win, number one, and you really need to hope that Tennessee Tech and UT Martin lose. Because with that, it would just be you versus Southeast Missouri, head-to-head. You just beat them, and you would be the Big South-OVC champions. But overall, remember what we talked about yesterday. Even if they don't get the automatic bid, a 9-win season from them could put them in position to make the playoffs as an at-large bid. So that's something that's important. The road to the playoffs for Tennessee State means you have to win this week to give yourself a really good chance. And it could also give you the automatic bid if Tennessee Tech and UT Martin lose and Tennessee State wins. So if Tennessee State is the only team in that state to win this week out of the Big South-OVC, then they will be your 2024 conference champions, and that'll be major for them. Speaking of conference champions, let's go to the divisional champions, close as we can get right now until we have the SWAC championship game. But that is Southern because they punched their ticket to their second SWAC championship in 3 years. And once again, that game will be against Jackson State. One thing that I thought was really cool is after the game, y'all know if you're an everyday, or if you've been here for a long time, I've always expressed an appreciation for coaches who talk they talk. Like, I like that personally. And when Coach Graves came up there and he littered off all the celebrity or head coaching experience, or you just been here, all of the critiques and reasons that he's heard people say he shouldn't have been the coach of Southern, as you're going into being a SWAC championship appearance, or having a SWAC championship appearance, and saying, but I am a winning coach and I stand on that. I said it then, I stand on it. I really did appreciate that. And I thought that that was a really good moment. And they did it with some style, right? Big boy, that little 7-yard fumble six felt like it was 70 with the effort he had to put in. He had to get that man some oxygen. Anyway, for Texas Southern, this one's not complicated. For TSU, it's simple. I just want to finish ahead of PV, because that hasn't happened ever in my life, or in my TSU life, I should say. So for me, that's a big deal. I ain't gonna lie to you, because bragging rights is real. And if you say that, oh, we beat PV, but we was better than y'all this year, I don't like that. It takes a little bit of a luster off of that victory. I want to keep it. That's a little bit of a favoritism side. But let me take the alumni part out of it. If we're just looking at Chris Dishman in his first year, to have a 500 record in conference would be a big thing. Moments fade. Certain moments stand out. Like ending that streak against PV is going to live on for a long time. That is something that for us in the alumni base is going to last a long time. But at the end of the day, that close loss to Southern that you shouldn't have had, that's going to fade. This win against Bethune-Cookman, that's going to fade. Your record in conference is going to stick. So if you go 4-4 opposed to 3-5, that's going to look way better on you when years down the line you say, oh, he didn't have a losing record in conference in his first season. That matters. Then you go into Alcorn. Alcorn jumped out to a 13-0 lead and really controlled PV. It was a close matchup because it spent a lot of the whole fourth quarter, pretty much until the last 2 minutes. It was a one-score game, and then they finally did put a little bit of distance, but it wasn't a blowout. This was just a controlling victory for the Braves. Unfortunately for them, they're one of two teams who are locked in exactly where they are in the SWAC West. Them and Southern are 1-2. And there's no chance that Southern goes to 2 and no chance that Alcorn goes to 1, but they are 1-2. Then you go into UAPB, or excuse me, let me go Prairie View, because I like going in order because I'll fool around and forget. Prairie View, they haven't had a losing record since the world was supposed to end. And I mean that literally. 2012 was the last time that the Prairie View A&M Panthers had a losing record in conference. They're looking to avoid that. I don't predict that they will. But like I said last week, I didn't predict that they would beat Alabama State a year ago in the same exact situation, basically. The stakes weren't the same, and they won. To me, I think that they're going to lose to Alabama State. That is my prediction. And the streak of retaining a winning record in conference is going to fall. So for the first time in 12 years, I think that PV will have a losing record in conference. They already lost the streak of finishing first or second. They've been doing that for the last 5 or so years. So this is a down year for PV, but I can't count them out. I think that Bubba is a good coach, honestly. I think that they have a good ball club. I think they have good leadership. So I would like to see what PV does next year. And one thing you'll notice, that I don't think the continuity between year to year is that high. So a lot of changing pieces in a lot of different places. That's the way that I look at it. UAPB, Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff, they are also interesting, but for a different reason. If I'm them, I'm treating this game as a get Giovanni Gibson the regular season title game. Right now, who was the leader in yards per game was Giovanni Gibson for a long time. He held that crown for a long time. But now you have Efton Chisholm out of Eastern Washington who has that crown. And he's 30 yards ahead of Gibson. And he gets a lot of receptions, right? Like, it's a massive gap in between the amount of receptions they get. So while Gibson is pretty much a huge home run hitter in the yards per catch, is way in favor of the Golden Lion. Eastern Washington has it as far as yardage. 30 yards. I'm trying to get him up to 150. That's my goal. I'm not even gonna lie to you. And we ain't got nothing to play for. My whole thing, if I was UAPB, And I don't know what time that Eastern Washington plays. It says 12 o'clock, but I don't know if they're giving it in my time zone or in their time zone. But if I'm UAPB, and I understand that Giovanni Gibson is only 30 yards away from the person in front of him for the most yards in the regular season, I'm doing everything I can. I'm getting bombs, right? I'm trying to get him 150 or so yards. It's been almost a month since he's had a 100-yard game. That ends on Saturday if I am the UAPB offensive coordinator. Now, the Texas Southern alum in me says, forget all of that. We clamping that up. That's how it is. Grambling, another one-score loss for them. This time, they had a 17-3 lead in the second quarter. I can't sit here and say that that's a comfortable lead. I know a lot of people try to treat 14-point leads in the second quarter. I remember when Deshaun Watson and the Texans gave up a lead to the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, and people thought, oh, you gave up. Da, da, da. It wasn't that major to me, but I know people treat these leads as something. But it's a little bit more disappointing when you don't score any points, right? You are up 17-3 and you don't score at all after that. To me, that's then a problem. That's then when we get into the conversation of, your offense stagnated for the last 37 minutes of the game. But on the bright side, I actually like Grambling. So I want to focus on something that's good. Andrew Jones still balling, forced a fumble, recovered a fumble, returned that fumble for a touchdown, had 15 tackles, right? Like a tackle for a loss. Andrew Jones is doing what he needs to do. Andrew Jones is still my favorite for the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year. We will likely at the end of the season sit down and compare him and Traquan Thomas, because I think if Traquan Thomas does what he's been doing, he will, and Joshua Nobles does what he's been doing, Thomas will be the one who has the SWAC lead. I think that he's up by half a sack right now. But it'll be one to watch. I cannot wait to do it. Actually, yeah, Traquan Thomas has 2 games left. Joshua Nobles has 1 if we're talking regular season. I think that Thomas will end with the league in sacks. But yeah, let's move forward, man, because my DPOY, right? My defensive player of the year is Andrew Jones, but I think we'll have a conversation about how we value statistics at some point after the season. Let's move into the SWAC East, because I want to look at what this win means for Valley. This was a big-time victory, and I want to recap that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time, it's the only place I go for my tickets. Had the Saints versus Buccaneers game that I went to the other day, or the other month. Game Time. I'm in the Superdome with tickets I got from Game Time, and I was able to see my seats before I ever picked them. I knew exactly where I was going to be sitting, and I can do the same thing when I go to a Mavericks game, right? I'm not a Mavs fan, for the record. It's Pels, you know what I'm saying? But the point is, if the Mavs and Pelicans play and I want to go to that game, I can see my tickets before I go to the AAC. It's all about convenience. For me, the ability to see where I'm sitting, the ability to know I'm getting the best prices, and the ability to know I'm not being fooled with the prices that I'm seeing. That's important, all 3 of those things, because I love all-in pricing. Do not give me hidden fees at the end. If I'm going to get the fees no matter what, show it to me now. And Game Time does that, and that's my favorite part about the service. So you go ahead and go to Game Time, download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. You get $20 off when you use the code Locked On College on the Game Time website or Game Time app. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football to break down the biggest stories. I'm hearing a whole lot of college football playoff talk. I need you to check that out to get the best coverage of it. Mississippi Valley State, this is easily the biggest Mississippi Valley State win in years, probably since they knocked off PV in 2021, right before PV went to the SWAC championship game. This is a really big deal for Valley. I know it can be difficult to play, to root, to coach. Like, I make a lot of jokes about Valley. I'm about to reference how bad they've been, but this is not a joke. This is not me trying to play. Right? So, like, it's difficult when you struggle for that long to keep your morale up. And I think wins like this are morale boosters. Wins like this say, oh, we can compete. And especially if you beat a team like FAMU. And I understand that FAMU may not be what we thought they were, but let's be real. Nobody is expecting, no matter what you thought about FAMU, for them to lose to Mississippi Valley State. This is a huge victory for Valley. This is the type of one that gives you hope and extends forever. To FAMU, this is a huge loss. Like the inverse of it. If it's a big win for Valley because of the reasons we said, it's a big loss for FAMU because of the reasons that we didn't say. Right? Like you're supposed to win this game. You have a certain standard. You are at home. There's a lot of things that went wrong in this game, but it's this type of loss that sparks change, and they've changed offensive play callers. So you're probably gonna have a new OC next year, right? You're probably not gonna have that same offensive coordinator in here calling plays, because if going into the Florida Classic, you out here, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and change play callers with 2 games left in the season. I can expect that you would change play callers going into next season. Just my assumption, right? As for Bethune-Cookman, Bethune-Cookman lost a close one to Texas Southern, and they lost it on the last second, or they failed to kick it into overtime in the last second. And that would have been the second week in a row that they had an overtime game. Hopefully this game didn't go into 5 overtimes, because to me, that's OD. I do not want 5 OTs. That's how I feel. Keep that away from me. But Bethune-Cookman, man, they tried to kick a field goal with less than 10 seconds left to come in and push it into overtime. But when that didn't happen, it was just another close loss, and it was a back-to-back close losses for him. Last week, it was an L in 5 overtimes against Southern, but obviously that's a close one. It came down to a 2-point conversion. This one came down to a missed field goal, and it's just that simple. For Alabama A&M, this win looked different for them. This win for Alabama A&M was a whole lot different because in the other 2 wins in conference play, you've had 50 points. This time you scored 22. They're not used to the offense. Probably, dang, we ain't scored 50 points and win. And it's not like they had to score 50 points in the games in which they did win. It's just that that's what they did. Hung 50 on UAPB, hung 50 on Bethune-Cookman. That's just what they do. But in this game against Grambling, it was way more measured. It was way lower output as far as points go. I think that this was unique, and I don't know if we see that again. They beat Georgetown from Kentucky like this, 22-16, something like that, right? That's very similar to this score. One thing I love about doing this is that you get to see both sides of everything. Like, we talk about the winner, we talk about the loser. Like, when you hear us talking about that close loss that Grambling had, which is one of many, this is what they've done. But then you hear the close victory and how it's so much different for them. And I don't know. And even then, you know, you got to show love to the Grambling defense. But we're not talking about Grambling right now. Alabama State, let's keep it in the state. Alabama State played the game that they wanted to play. Against Jackson State, the goal should have been to come in, play grinding defense, not allow many points on the board, and say we're going to give our offense as many opportunities as we possibly can to win this game. And that's what they did. Alabama State held Jackson State to 14 points. There was a safety that pushed it up to 16. You gave your offense every single chance. Every single chance. You gave it to them. They just didn't capitalize. At the end of the day, I don't think that there was a game style in which Alabama State was the favorites. But if you had to ask what was the desired way, the desired route to victory, it was this. You just didn't end it the way that you wanted to end it. And then Jackson State, it didn't take long for them to get back onto the top. TC Taylor did it in year 2. They're now the SWAC East champions for, the 3rd time in 4 years. They got their crown back quickly. So for me, I think it was a tough day on the offensive line. I think it was a tough day for a couple of things, right? Your running game wasn't as effective. Your ability to protect Jacobian Morgan wasn't great. So that Alabama State defensive line got active. But at the same time, sometimes you just need one of these grinded out type of games. And that's what you get. It's not about who you're facing. It's just about, hey, as long as it's a competent opponent, we just need these type of games to show you how to grit it out. Grit it out, man. Now let's move forward to the MEAC. Going to start off with South Carolina State because I did not mention one thing, and I think I maybe forgot on purpose. Who knows? Maybe that was just subconsciously on purpose. We'll do that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. When I'm looking at FanDuel, I'm looking at the NBA, I'm looking at the NFL, I'm looking at the NHL, I'm looking at the futures, I'm looking at the weeks, I'm thinking about the mid-game, all of it. If I want to say who's going to win the MVP, I could do that. If I want to talk about if this game is going to have a comeback, I could do that. They have everything on FanDuel. So you name it, you pick it. It's the Thanksgiving season, right? You name it. That's how we feeling. That's how we feeling when it comes to FanDuel, because it really is a pick your poison, you name it type of situation. Players, teams, spreads, mid-game, pre-game, end of the season. It has everything you could possibly want. So to me, FanDuel is the best place to make a little bit of extra money on what you already love. As a sports fan, I know you love it, and I know you love money because we all do. We all need it. We all want more of it, right? Well, some of us may not be money hungry, might not be greedy, but we're going to take more of it. And when you know what you're talking about on FanDuel, you can make more of it. Go ahead and get the $5 bet down, and if that wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. One thing that I didn't speak about when it came to South Carolina State is that the way that they rallied. You see the graphic up there, South Carolina State's resilience. How can you be resilient in a 54-7 victory? How can you be resilient in a game in which you dominated? That's because you dominated and won by over 40 points in a game where you only had your starting quarterback for 7 of those points. So when Eric Phoenix goes down, now you're running the football so much better. Now when Eric Phoenix goes down, your defense doesn't allow anything. When Eric Phoenix goes down, you don't get just 1 interception return for a touchdown. You get 2, one of which was 100 yards. So the one time you let them drive down, say, all right, no, that's enough. Let's sit up in the chair. That is what I mean when I say resilience on the part of South Carolina State. Because in a game in which if you lose, you very possibly could lose the MEAC based off of this game. And you lose your quarterback in the beginning of the game, and it turns out you don't need him. You put up 54 points with a backup quarterback. That's coaching once again. That's depth once again. That's weapons. That's everything. South Carolina State. Oh, my God. I can't wait to see this team in the Celebration Bowl. Oh, my God. All righty. That being said, Morgan State's defense has just been off. I don't say this to take away from South Carolina State. I think that they're a dominating offense, high powered. They could have put up points, but 54, take away the 2 pick sixes, 40. This continues a streak of Morgan State allowing more points than I feel like they should, more points than I'm familiar with. But then again, I heard about that Morgan State defense earlier in the year. Like, hey, might not be what you think it used to be. Still got some pieces, still got Elijah Williams. I still want to see if he's able to make it in the league. But that defense ain't as stacked as it's been in years past. And I think you saw that once the MEAC season started. It's been a little bit of a stretch. And I think even Central would have put up more points. I think Central could have gotten the 20s, maybe mid-20s, but they had a couple of shoot themselves in the foot moments. So got to look at that. Speaking of Central, that South Carolina State victory, that ends your season. There's no chance of the FCS playoffs. South Carolina State has clinched the MEAC. All of that is over. I think that Central had a really good season, a nice bounce-back season. I have to check Jamari Taylor's eligibility. Let me see. Jamari Taylor, because I just thought about that right now. If he's able to come back, then I feel a little bit more comfortable. They say he's a junior, so he'll be back next year, a redshirt junior. So he'll be back next year. You'll have Walker Harris for another year. You have some ability to come in and run this thing back with a more concentrated team. Let's see. Max Urin is a redshirt junior, so you got some pieces. If the transfer portal don't take some stuff from you, but Jamari Taylor had himself a day, the best game of his season. Jamari Taylor had over 200 yards against Howard. It's the first time he's crossed the 200-yard threshold. at all this year. He had 76 yards through the air, 78 yards through the air, another season high. So you're looking at a player who had nearly 300 total yards. Jamar Taylor's been a beast this year, and he ate up Howard. As for Howard, I'm going to focus on some of the good. I talked about the offense yesterday. I'm going to focus on the good. They have 6 blocked field goals this year, which is good for second in the country on the FCS level. They've made plays. The defense has made plays. Don't let the scores and all these things fool you. They've made some plays on each side of the ball, on that side of the ball, and special teams. Combining Central and Howard, there was a scrap. They were scrapping, and nearly 40 people got suspended. I think 17 players from Howard, 19 players from Central, and I think a coach from Central. I think the coach was from Central. That was a tough one, man. That was a tough one. You don't want to see that, but it is what it is at the same time. As for the forgotten game of the weekend, and that is North Carolina. My mind's still on the scrap. Is on Norfolk State versus Delaware State. And I don't think there's too much to say here. They are the forgotten game because there was way more high-profile matchups. As for Delaware State, they just keep allowing 30 points. That's what they do. The one game in which they scored 30 points was against South Carolina State. Super misleading. The backups were in all of that. But in that game that you scored 30 points, you let up 69. The one game where I feel like you really put up points was 28. And that was against Morgan State, but they outscored you. So that defense has been a problem. This isn't to say that the offense has been great either. Even though I would say that I gotta make sure I get the right Jaden, because they got so many sticking Jadens on this team. But Jaden Sutton, he's had some really good games. He's been over 130 yards for 3 of the last 4 weeks, so I'll show him some love there. As for the team that beat him, Norfolk State, Jalen Daniels has just been steady. He's just been steady. This game, he was 15 or 13 for 21, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, just steady the whole way. Like, I don't know any other way to break it down for him. That's what he's been the majority of the season. I don't feel like he's made a lot of mistakes. He may not have made a lot of big plays, but he's just been steady the whole season, you know? And then as for the independents, the only thing that changed for North Carolina A&T is that they put up 13 points. So they were able to get on the board twice this week, which wasn't the case the last couple of weeks, but they still let up 30 points. I'm just ready for the season to be over for them, so that we can see them try to continue to implement Vincent Brown's strategy and everything. There's a similar conversation. It's just way more exciting for Hampton. It's the same thing as always. They go against a ranked opponent. They're close in this game, but they aren't able to pull it out. They have not beaten a ranked opponent this year in the CAA, but they've been close with everybody but William and Mary. This time it was Richmond, and you lost by 3 points. That game was a 3-point game for pretty much the back half of the fourth quarter. I think in one way, it's a silver lining that you're close with all of these teams. And you hope that, okay, that means that we're acclimating, and next year we'll be ready to win these games. But at the same time, it sucks to lose that many close games. Ask Grambling. Close games sometimes hurt worse, because you feel like if I just would have done this or I just would have done that, then we would have ended up with a victory, especially over a top 15, top 10 type of team. Hampton's a solid club, guys. Solid club. But that CAA gauntlet been a little bit too much for them. That is our HBCU circuit. We got it all in. That's 20 some odd schools in less than 30 minutes. I appreciate you for riding the circuit with me. On tomorrow, we'll be breaking down some of the extra games to watch this weekend. I think we might not do it all show because some teams are off this week. So we'll look at that as we continue in our week of process, or a week lead up into the last week of the regular season for so many teams. I don't even know what the game of the week is going to be this week. I don't know. Anyway, I'm talked out. I can't talk anymore. So in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.